Hi, I'm Daphne Richards, and this is Augie, CTG's resident doggy horticulturist. Our question of the week is, what can we prune now, and should we fertilize plants that just finished blooming? Well, pruning can be a tricky subject, and the key to pruning is knowing your plant's growth habit and understanding how pruning affects each plant. Most trees should be pruned in the winter, but if your deciduous tree struggled in last summer's heat and you were waiting until they leafed out to see which areas were truly dead, you can go ahead and prune out any obviously dead growth now. Be sure to use pruning paint on any oaks that you prune right now. With temperatures warming up, the possibility of oak wilt infection is increasing. Shrubs, especially those that require hedging, should be pruned now, before temperatures really heat up. Be sure to use nice sharp shears when pruning hedges, so that you make a clean cut. You don't want the tops to have torn leaf edges that not only look unsightly, but also heal less quickly and serve as an open door for disease pathogens to move right in. If your spring flowering bulbs and perennials have finished flowering, you can go ahead and clean those up a bit to encourage them to put on a new flush of growth and perhaps even flower again for you, depending on each plant. And if you have any plants that bloom all summer that have started to slow down a bit in the heat, a little deadheading to remove spent blooms will encourage new blooms to form faster. It's also a great idea to give a light dose of fertilizer to plants that have just finished blooming. Flowering and forming seed heads take a lot of energy, and replenishing some of a plant's nutrients so that it can rebuild its own body after having given so much of its precious energy to the next generation is a great idea. But just a light dose. We're coming into the heat of summer now, and you don't want to encourage your plants to grow too much at such a stressful time of year. Our plant of the week is Mexican honeysuckle, Justicia spicigera. Although it shares a common name with our common honeysuckle, Lonicera japonica, and looks somewhat similar, these two plants are not related. But Mexican honeysuckle is related to another great plant for Central Texas gardens, shrimp plant. Viewer Nancy Yerk sent us these pictures that her friend Bob Phillips photographed in her garden. She moved her plants from a former garden, and last year they were a little slow to establish. They're now quite at home in the southwest corner of her garden, where they get shade from a cedar elm. In harsh winters, Mexican honeysuckle is perennial, dying back to the ground. But in our mostly mild Central Texas winters, Mexican honeysuckle is evergreen, sometimes not even being frostbit. But it will benefit from a bit of pruning in late winter to invigorate new growth. It can get 2 to 3 feet tall and spreads much wider, so give it plenty of space to spread out. It isn't too picky about soil type, but it does need a little supplemental irrigation, especially if the summer is hot and dry. Mexican honeysuckle needs a little sun to put on a nice show of flowers, but it does like to be in a bit of shade and will struggle in too much sun. In mid to late summer, Mexican honeysuckle will put on a gorgeous display of bright orange flowers, which contrasts nicely with the deep velvety green of its leaves. And it normally stays covered with blooms all the way up until the first frost. To do in your garden this week, if the leaves on your spring flowering bulbs have begun to turn brown, you can cut them back now. It's also a good time to divide them while you can still see them. We'd love to hear from you. Please visit klru.org/ctg to send us your questions or a plant of the week from your garden.